Tarantino's gone on record saying he hated the 80s, but that's kind of the point. Because for every polished masterpiece or franchise starter, the decade also cranked out a ton of strange, messy, and oddly charming misfires. And that's exactly why modern pop culture can't let the 80s go. This was the era where movies could be totally weird and still somehow unforgettable. This video is all about the bizarre and forgotten side of 80s cinema, the films that didn't become classics but still deserve a second look. This one's legendary, but for all the wrong reasons. The Garbage Pail Kids movie came out in 1987 and is based on a line of trading cards from the 80s that were basically the gross-out version of Cabbage Patch Kids. A kid named Dodger gets bullied by some older teens, and his life turns around when a group of disgusting, chaotic little mutants known as the Garbage Pail Kids show up to help. Help, in this case, mostly means making things worse in every possible way. This movie has gone down as one of the worst of all time. No joke, it has a Metacritic score of 1 out of 100. The costumes are nightmare fuel, the humor doesn't land, and it honestly just feels like no one involved understood what made the cards popular in the first place. But here's the thing, it's so bizarre, so off the rails, that it's kind of amazing it exists at all. As a piece of 1980s movie history, it's worth knowing about. Whether it deserves a remake is debatable, but in a world where everything gets rebooted, someone's probably thinking about it. Weird Science is peak 80s teen movie weirdness. It's about two high school nerds, Gary and Wyatt, who decide to build the perfect woman using their computer. This was before the internet, so they just hook it up to a Barbie doll, run some lightning through it, and wouldn't you know it, Kelly LeBrock appears. She's not just a love interest, she has superpowers, hacks into missile systems, and basically takes over their lives. This was written and directed by John Hughes, who pretty much ran teen cinema in the 80s. He made The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller, 16 Candles, all those classics. Weird Science is a bit more out there than his usual stuff, but it's still a fun time. It's got teenage fantasy, absurd comedy, and a killer theme song. It's not the most polished of Hughes's work, and some of the jokes definitely haven't aged well. But it's still a solid time capsule from an era when movies could be this completely unfiltered. Obviously, no studio would actually greenlit it today. This was a major passion project from Jim Henson and Frank Oz, the same team behind The Muppets and Sesame Street. But this one's not for little kids. It's a full-on fantasy epic, done entirely with puppets, no human actors at all. The story takes place in a world ruled by the Skeksis, these creepy vulture-like creatures who use a cracked magical crystal to stay in power. A young gelfling named Jen has to find a missing shard and fix the crystal before the whole planet falls apart. The puppetry and set design are insane. Every creature, every landscape, every little detail was handmade, and it all holds up surprisingly well. It didn't do huge numbers at the box office, but it built a cult following over the years. Netflix even brought it back as a prequel series in 2019, though it got canceled after one season. Even so, the original movie stands on its own as a massive creative achievement. If you've never seen it, it's worth checking out just to see what kind of world building you can pull off without any CGI. Emilio Estevez plays Otto, a bored punk who quits his supermarket job and falls into the weird world of repossessing cars. He teams up with Bud, played by Harry Dean Stanton, and things start off strange, but they get way stranger. Otto gets wrapped up in chasing down a Chevy Malibu with a $20,000 bounty on it. Problem is, there's something seriously dangerous in the trunk. Aliens? Radiation? Nobody really knows, and that's kind of the point. The whole movie runs on some paranoid punk rock energy that never stops moving. What makes Repo Man stand out isn't just the sci-fi plot or the black comedy, it's how completely uninterested it is in being normal. It doesn't follow rules, it doesn't care if you're confused, it just does its thing, and somehow it all works. Hollywood wouldn't touch something like this today, but in the 80s, this kind of madness made it to theaters, and it's still one of the most original movies of the decade. Jeffrey Combs plays Herbert West, a med student with one goal: bring the dead back to life. And he does. Kind of. He starts by experimenting on animals, then human corpses, and eventually drags his poor roommate Dan into it. Let's just say the results aren't exactly clean or ethical. This movie is gory, ridiculous, and weirdly funny. It goes from creepy to over the top in seconds and somehow keeps a totally straight face while doing it. There's a talking severed head, there's a lot of body parts flying around, and the tone somehow stays light without ever backing off the horror. Re-Animator went on to launch a full franchise, but the original is still the one that hits hardest. It's got clever writing, nasty practical effects, and that perfect mix of horror and comedy that only worked in the 80s. If you can handle the gore, it's a blast. Arnold Schwarzenegger plays Conan, a kid whose parents are killed by an evil cult leader named Thulsa Doom, played by James Earl Jones. Conan grows up as a slave, gets jacked beyond belief, and eventually sets out for revenge. That's basically the whole story, and that's all it needs. This is classic sword and sandal stuff. Arnold swings huge swords, crushes skulls, and grunts his way through one ridiculous battle after another. It's violent, cheesy, and completely unashamed of what it is. The sets are massive, the music's epic, and Schwarzenegger's screen presence carries the whole thing. This movie helped launch him as an action star, and honestly, it's easy to see why. He doesn't say much, but he doesn't have to. It's not trying to be deep or meaningful. It just delivers exactly what it promises: big muscles, bigger swords, and lots of blood. Sometimes that's all you want. This one's exactly what it sounds like. Earth Girls Are Easy, from 1988. It's a musical sci-fi comedy with Geena Davis, Jeff Goldblum, Jim Carrey, and Damon Wayans, all in full alien mode. Geena Davis plays Valerie, a Southern California hairdresser who finds out her fiancé's cheating on her. Right after that, 3 aliens crash land into her swimming pool. They're furry, colorful, and speak in weird noises, but they get a makeover, learn English, and try to blend into Los Angeles. The movie's goofy on purpose. It's full of musical numbers and totally over the top, but it's not brainless. There's actually a decent amount of satire in how it plays with gender roles, dating culture, and American vanity. Plus, you've got early Jim Carrey doing physical comedy in an alien bodysuit. If you're into 80s oddities, this is one of the most fun ones to revisit. The Toxic Avenger is basically Revenge of the Nerds meets nuclear waste. Melvin Junko is a bullied janitor who falls into a vat of toxic sludge and turns into a super strong, hideously deformed monster with a heart of gold. After that, he becomes the unofficial superhero of Traumaville, taking out criminals in the most over-the-top ways imaginable. This is peak trauma entertainment, low budget, violent, full of gross-out effects, and proudly offensive. But it's also kind of brilliant in how shameless it is. If you're new to trauma, this is where most people start. And it's not just a relic, there's a reboot on the way starring Peter Dinklage, coming out this August, so there's no better time to revisit this one. Now for one of the most ridiculous and somehow unforgettable movies of the decade, Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Yes, that's the actual title, and yes, the plot is exactly what it sounds like. A spaceship shaped like a circus tent lands near a small town, and a bunch of alien clowns show up and start turning people into cotton candy cocoons and popping heads with shadow puppets. The story follows Mike and Debbie, a couple who stumble onto the invasion early. Of course, no one believes them, because who's going to take alien clowns seriously? But the bodies start piling up, and eventually, it's up to a small group of locals to stop the insanity. There's nothing subtle about this movie. It's pure B-movie nonsense, but it knows exactly what it is. The effects are actually pretty creative, the costumes are insane, and the whole thing plays like a midnight movie that's completely in on the joke. It's not for everyone, but if you're into goofy horror with creative practical effects and zero concern for logic, Killer Klowns totally holds up. Cult favorite status absolutely earned. This one is the Marvel movie nobody asked for, and still nobody fully understands. The story starts with a laser experiment gone wrong, and suddenly a humanoid duck from outer space crashes into Cleveland. His name's Howard. He smokes cigars, cracks wise, and somehow ends up fighting off an alien invasion with help from Leah Thompson and a pre-Shawshank Tim Robbins. This thing was a mess from the start. It had George Lucas behind it, fresh off Star Wars, and still managed to bomb hard. It cost $36 million, which was a massive budget at the time, especially for a movie about a talking duck. and it pulled in just under $38 million worldwide. Technically, it made its money back on paper, but once you factor in marketing and everything else, it lost a ton. It flopped so badly, Lucas had to sell off parts of his company afterward, Pixar included. That's how bad it got. But here's the weird part. Over time, Howard the Duck developed a kind of cult following. He's popped up in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and fans still quote the original. It's a disaster, sure, but it's the kind of disaster that people remember.